Welcome to the Controversial Podcast. I'm your member, Isaac.
I'm Gabe.
I'm Sion.
And today we're going to be going over a couple controversial topics. We're planning on covering three. First, we're going to cover fossil fuels. Then we're going to cover Islamophobia in the U.S. and why it matters or doesn't. And then we're going to cover AI regulation and see whether it should be regulated or not. So let's get into it.
All right, let's start with fossil fuels. So basically, why we need to stop using fossil fuels? By Sarah Hadou Amar, the article "Why We Need to Stop Using Fossil Fuels," posted in July 2022. This source discusses how governments are starting to use renewable energy resources and embracing their existence. However, fossil fuels are still the leading energy source because of their high energy density. They explain how fossil fuels are one of the most widely ranged applications because it's not just used for energy production, but also for products like cosmetics and medicine. Switching from fossil fuels to a more sustainable and plant-friendly energy sources is more complicated than it sounds because so many are involved in the fossil fuel industry, and to not use fossil fuels would destroy the jobs of those who are in that industry. It goes over how fossil fuel emissions affect our planet's health, for example, damage to our ecosystems and deadly pollutant spread, and how they greatly affect our planet's health and causing greater natural disasters.
So I understand that you want us to keep not use like fossil fuels.
Yeah.
But I feel as if a really good reason as to why we should keep using them is that they're more reliable than things like renewable energy. And so one of the biggest disadvantages that comes with renewable energy is that it changes like based on the environment. So if the wind blows, or if it depends on like the wind or the sun, and so like if it's not efficient and things like that, it's not gonna have as good of an outcome as say like fossil fuels, because there's something we've been relying on for hundreds of years. We have good infrastructure for them, so I feel as if we should just keep using them.
Yeah, I would like to agree and disagree on that point. Although, yeah, they are more efficient now and they're used widely. I feel like that with recent technology such as Dodge, Mercedes-Benz, and other companies coming out with hydrogen and electric-powered cars that can perform even better than fossil fuel cars, or cars that run on fossil fuels. I think that market is becoming more open and it's becoming more accessible to the average person and to more companies. So I feel like this is just the start of it, and soon fossil fuels will be out of the way, and most people who work for companies, own businesses, work in the government, they've been pushing against fossil fuels. So I think that, they won't be around for much longer.
Both really good points. Sean, I like how you oppose saying it's not reliable. Or how they're more reliable. That is true, but there are other options that are still very reliable. So like how you said, if the sun's not showing, referencing solar power. So fossil fuels produce great energy that powers our cities, but they still come at a great cost. So yes, they are more reliable, but the benefiting factor that we are getting from it is only temporary, while if we keep using this in the future, it's going to eventually, kick us back in the face. It's not going to be so good.
But the thing is, it's like we can regulate things like fossil fuels, and so here the big kicker is that they're a lot cheaper than renewable energy sources as of right now. And so I feel as if renewable energy, you could make an argument for it in the future, but as of right now, it's not nearly as efficient as we need it to be to completely replace it. And so I feel as if fossil fuels are just doing a better job, especially just, right now. And a lot of companies still use them. A lot of people, of course, they're like trying to go, like Isaac was saying, electric with electric cars, like Mercedes-Benz, Audi, all these other big car brands. But I feel as if they're not exactly the most useful for day-to-day people, because not everybody has the time to go charge at a charging station or do things like that. And so I understand that, it is a viable solution in the near future, but I feel as if it's still kind of shaky as to whether or not it's going to be as efficient in the next 5 years, 10 years, or however long it takes.
Yeah, and I agree with that point to some degree that, currently right now the electric cars may not be as good, but in the future as, ranges have been going up with the new Tesla cars and the Rivian cars coming out. For example, the latest Rivian pickup truck can get, I believe it was, let me cite it, right here off their website, it says it can get about 470 miles per full charge. So, and they're saying that they're working on improving those numbers and upgrading them. But yeah, so I think that over time, the range with those, the reliability, etc. It's also less maintenance on a Tesla than it is for a Ford truck right now. So, it's about like reliability and the range that they're improving on over time.
That's true. They are getting better. It is not as efficient as we need it to be now, but that's also because we're still, relying on fossil fuels like a crutch. So the fossil fuels, when they're burned, they release carbon dioxide, and it's said to be one of the biggest reasons why global warming exists. And global warming is the warming of the global climate caused by heat and radiation from the sun being absorbed by the carbon dioxide in our atmosphere. It also says how 17.6 million Americans are exposed to toxic air pollution daily. And that is a quote by Fossil Fuel, The Dirty Facts by Denchak Melissa, posted in June 2022. Another point by the Fossil Fuels and Health at seachange.org, posted in June 2022. This article, a study done by Harvard University and the University of Birmingham, found out more than 8 million people died in 2018 from fossil pollution. This means the burning of fossil fuels was responsible for 1 in 5 deaths worldwide. The pollutants being released have been linked to early death, respiratory disorders, asthma, stroke, and heart attacks. Lancet Countdown on Health and Climate Change tracked and identified at least 21 different pollutants, each one affecting a person's health.
Well, I see, that is a really big issue with fossil fuels is that, they have like an immense impact on climate change. And because there's so many companies and like countries that use them, that, it is affecting us. And yes, we are going to need to eventually change that. But as of right now, I feel as if we regulate fossil fuels, because I know a lot of people have been stating recently that, we should regulate fossil fuels instead of entirely get rid of them right now. Because fossil fuels are so abundant everywhere. Every single country can use them. And it's harder for third world countries to get things like energy, like renewable energy. It's harder for them to build the infrastructure to get that. So there's always going to be fossil fuels as long as there's poor countries. And so I feel as if, we need to have some kind of way for renewable energy to have as good infrastructure as fossil fuels. Or else you're still going to have third world countries and poor countries having those factories, having those all using fossil fuels to the best of their ability so they can get to the point where, first world countries like America and the UK and all these other places that have renewable energy, they can be on that same level.
Yeah, I totally agree with that point. And speaking of that, this can actually bring us to our second point. There's a lot of fossil fuels used in the Middle Eastern, and a lot of those countries are Islam and Muslim. So I feel like, do you think that because of their religion, they have a role in it? And do you think that the U.S. Can be a little Islamophobia because of that reasoning?
I do see, like, I'm not exactly sure if the oil production would have to do anything with it. I know there are some slurs and some, different types of things that go around because of that whole thing where they mention a lot of, racist folks in the U.S. will mention, that they love oil and they love oil, they control all the oil. And so that might be plausible as to a reason as to why there is Islamophobia in the U.S. But I feel like the bigger issue is that Islamophobia is in the U.S. It's not something that can be argued, but it matters. And so I feel as if that's the topic that we need to focus on, is that Islamophobia is already in the U.S. and it matters a lot.
Now, Shayon, I do agree with that point, but recent research shows that in the year 2022, there's about 3.45 million Muslims, and but Christians, there's 332 million on average. So I feel like that, Islamophobia is still current in the U.S., but I feel like it could be more predominant because, people are Christians and etc. But with Christian values, based off Christians I know and Christians I've talked to and stuff, it seems like that they want to respect all religions. So I don't know if that's the main cause for Islamophobia, but I do not disagree with you that it does exist in the U.S.
So I think, yeah, it does exist in the U.S. and stuff like that, but I feel as if it matters all throughout the world. And the U.S. is one of the most predominant places that it's in, obviously because of, the 9/11 attacks, which I believe is that's a small group of radicals, not the entire religion. And I feel as if even though a lot of people know that, they're just kind of scared because of what they've been told through like the government and whatnot and a bunch of false information from news sources. But I feel as if it's something that we really need to talk about, especially because even though it's not, you could argue it's not too predominant in the U.S., but even here at the University of Utah, it's even here in the University of Utah, it's present. There's students that have described, having to face Islamophobia, and one of these students she was here at the University of Utah, and there was a lot of people that were asking her really rude questions about her religion and kind of almost throwing shots, if you will, at her and just kind of, making some really rude assumptions. So I feel as if, you could say that it's not too predominant here, but it's already here in Utah, and Utah is, a predominantly Mormon state. So Islamophobia is everywhere.
I do agree with you on that. It absolutely is everywhere. And it's, we gotta work on that. It is a giant problem. But I do think we are making it a bigger problem. Like in the reality of it, it's not as big a problem as we're kind of describing it as.
Yeah, I personally agree with that, Gabe, to some extent. I do believe it is a problem, but, I feel as if it's not as big of an issue as, let's say, women's rights in the U.S. or just around the world. But I feel like that there is still issues with it. Is still a problem. But I feel like that people have become more open to it, especially since it's growing in the U.S. Not Utah, of course, where most of the state is Mormon. So I do believe that in Utah, there's probably more Islamophobia than in other states that aren't as open-minded to other religions. But I do agree with Gabe still on the point, though, that it's not as big of an issue as it's made out to seem, and that sometimes it can be exaggerated. But it is still an issue, and one on the rising, which I think in future years, as the Islam population grows, which it's expected to, then it will become more and more and more of a problem. But yeah.
Yeah, and so I like how you said that it's supposed to grow. And the truth is that there was data that shows that Islam is one of the fastest growing religions within the world. And that's definitely going to have there's probably going to be some controversy that goes along with that. There's going to be some people that believe that Islam is, this evil religion based on, terrorist attacks and other things like that. But I don't think it's exaggerated at all. And the reason for that is because it affects so many people around the world, especially including me. I've been subject to it before. I've been asked, some pretty disrespectful things in the past. And I feel as if, personally, coming from a Muslim, it is a really big thing that we should talk about, because we talk about things like anti-Semitism all the time. We talk about things like racism all the time. So I'm wondering why, Islamophobia isn't up there as well, because we have such a huge populations of Muslims in the world. It's in the billions, but yet we don't talk about it at all. And I'm just wondering why you guys don't want to talk about it, or, why do you guys not think it's important?
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I feel like it is important, of course, and I feel like it needs to be spoken about. But I feel like there's other issues that need more light to it. For example, child sex trafficking, human trafficking in general, other issues like that. Those are on the rise in Utah and states around the world, and I feel like that you could focus on someone else's religion, but what's the point of that when they're going to keep their beliefs and do as they want to do because it's their religion that they chose to follow? Whereas, there's more important issues like people getting kidnapped, etc., stuff like that, kids missing, global warming. And I feel like that those are predominantly the prime issues right now. And that with your religion, that if you believe in it truly, then you shouldn't need to convince other people. But, I would still say that, it still is an issue. And, yeah.
I do agree with that. It's absolutely still an issue. It's one of the many problems we have to face in the U.S. today. We are not a perfect country. There are many, 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 many problems we have. Like just a recent one could be the growth in AI and how it's not yet regulated and how it should be regulated because it does pose a possible threat to many, many different things, like even the economy. So I'm going to reference records.com and how AI should be regulated because the new software it has, it can use voices of different artists and musicians and form together different songs without their will, and people are using that to sell and make money. And they're using artists' voices from that and making money for themselves. And I don't think that's right.
Yeah, and I totally agree with that point, Gabe. I do believe that AI should be regulated because, first of all, it's recent technology that hasn't even been out for more than around 2 decades. So it started around 1960 is when the first AI, I guess you could say, was made. But over the years, it's growing, it's learning, and it's expanding on its own. So it's able to take knowledge from other things, take it for itself, and expand on that to make itself learn for itself. Some AIs can do that. So I feel like that, it could potentially be bad. What are they learning? Why do they do what they do? For example, the one of the first dudes to start experiments with AI, he worked for a tech company. His company was trying to use it to train them to ship packages and to put them in packaging trucks. So they first tested it off with yellow balls and seeing if the AIs could pick them up. And so it took them 5 days, and then one AI bot started picking up the yellow ball. And then the other one started doing it too. And when they started to go into depth and check out the code, etc., and all the reasoning as to why it's doing this, they couldn't find any specific reason as to why it's doing it. So they had no idea why it was learning. And he went on CNN and Fox, and he explained that he doesn't know why they are doing this, and he thinks that it's a danger himself when he's one of the ones who started the development and evolution of AI.
Well, I mean, I feel as if there's a difference between this quote unquote there's a difference between the whole danger about AI and the regulation. And so I feel like AI by itself is not really such a dangerous topic, and I feel like it shouldn't be needed to be regulated because we're not at the point where AI acts like things like the Terminator or things like that, where it's these really advanced robots. A lot of AIs nowadays, you have to input the information yourself, or it can use Google or other search engines or things like that. But it has to have all the information put into it. We don't have any AI that can serve itself basically or think for itself completely yet. And so we're still always going to have those engineers and those other people keeping things like that in check. So like you said, how the guy, he was the guy said, oh yeah, AI is dangerous. Yeah, it potentially could be, but as of right now, it really isn't. And I believe that we should explore AI without, any regulations.
That is a good point. How it is not Terminator type level. But there are also some pros of regulation. By Forbes.com, AI regulations can provide a global framework for ethical practices, information security, consumer rights, and other issues. It can provide a level of fairness and reason in the design of technologies that work toward improving the lives of human beings. Oversight will ensure that infringements on fundamental human rights are respected, and regulation can help, prevent private data from being stolen. We don't want another Facebook incident.
Yeah, and I totally agree with that. Because, when the U.S. was first developing and capitalism was in its early stages, a lot of people were making monopolies and trusts together, etc. They were finding ways to get profits and stuff from the public without necessarily them knowing that it's a monopoly or a trust. And they were doing illegal practices as of today that the government had to regulate. They had to go through processes. They had to investigate, track down these companies. They had to help out consumers, etc. So I feel like that it would just be sort of a step back if we don't regulate it now, because eventually I know it will come to regulating it with how it's been growing, etc. Even the Google CEO said he has some concerns for AI itself. But I do like to agree with your point, Cheyenne, that AI should not be regulated now. I feel like it should be regulated in the next couple of months or a year, because it's been growing at a rapid pace, from going to be able to write what you want, to be able to make images, to be able to make videos. And now they're working on it to be able to think for itself and perform tasks just like a human. And recently also they've been using it, as Gabe was saying, to take actors, musicians' voices and use that to make music that the musician wouldn't even, think of making, because they have their voice. So they're able to use that and do whatever with it. And it's making a lot of artists and musicians lose their jobs. So I feel like that, as AI keeps expanding and keeps growing, the job market will just keep on going down, because, they'll find AI bots to regulate everything that needs to be done. And then humans, if we have a robot who can do it without any errors, then what's the reason for a human, I feel like, other than to regulate the bots?
And I feel like that is valid. I know that's a lot of that stuff is up in the air with how AI will eventually try to take jobs and things like that. But from what I've heard is that it won't be here for a really long time. And the thing is, I do agree that there are certain aspects that need to be regulated, but we should still explore the possibilities of AI, because like you said, something without an AI that can make no errors would be amazing at things like in the medical field for surgeons. Because imagine you would have an AI doctor that controls a robot that could complete surgeries with 100% success rate. Just imagine how many lives that could save for so many people. And I feel as if that would be a huge benefit, but by regulating AI and stopping, any experiments with it, we fail to reach any point where AI can even possibly be helpful to people. It's just small tasks that it could be helpful with, like you said, like writing or documents and all these things like that. But I feel as if that's too small of a scope for AI to be even remotely effective in, and it has so many possibilities that it's being limited by these regulations. And I do agree that, some regulations do need to be made, but the regulations are really overbearing and they're limiting AI.
Mm-hmm. I really agree with that point, Sean, and I'd like to say that, I agree that AI should not be regulated, or AI should not be regulated for right now. But I feel like in the future it definitely should, because, it's still new technology, so it would be interesting and it would be nice to see what it can do without any regulations. But the United States and other countries, if they're willing to take that risk, then they have to be able to combat the consequences that could come, which we don't know what they are.
And I like how, I do disagree with you, Sean, how you're saying we shouldn't regulate it now because it's not, it's not growing yet, but I disagree with that, how it's not growing. Many companies in the past couple of months have been integrating AI into their own companies. Like Snapchat has AI now, Photoshop has AI, even like Google has AI. Like everything is starting to be AI based, and everyone, like lots of companies are integrating it into their own systems and technology. I feel like it's just gonna keep on growing. So I feel like the sooner we regulate it, the more of a reliable tool to aid us it can be.
Well, I feel as if with the whole thing about what you're saying is kind of contradictory, because if you regulate it, then how is it supposed to grow? You know what I'm saying? Like, if you regulate something, then it doesn't have that opportunity to grow, and so you can't really do anything. And so that's why I believe that AI shouldn't be regulated.
All right, I think we'll end the podcast there. Thanks for tuning in. This is your co-host Isaac signing off.
This is Gabe signing off.
See you later. This is Cheyenne signing off.